welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, where we are your resource for education, connection, and collaboration. And I just want to start by saying this is a sponsored appearance, and I want to thank Deborah Charnes, White Sands Premier Travel, and Quantum Awakening for making Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross a possibility. Deborah Charnes is a celebrated wellness expert and author and of the award-winning book From the Boxing Ring to Ashram, Wisdom for the Mind, Body, and Spirit. With over 20 years of managing press events and influential figures, Deborah has transformed her high-pressure career into a mission of change for positive change. So her book has won in both she won goals. Let's just be clear about that. Those are goals that she won in both the self-help and the fitness and health categories. And she empowers readers to rise above the physical and emotional struggles and come out as champions. So Deborah, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to chat with you.
Absolutely. It's just amazing what you've done. Can you tell us what inspired you to transition from that high pressure career in corporate communications to a focus of wellness and mindfulness?
Yeah, I could go on forever about that. But from the time I was young, I was interested in holistic health. I started mindfulness and breath work and yoga when I was very young for physical pain. And I was always very careful of what I ate. So I was always interested in holistic approaches. And I remember even my mom once went to the doctor for something normal, and she said she found a holistic doctor she explained to me what it was, because I didn't know what that was back then, because I was, maybe a young teen. So I was always interested in that. But hey, you gotta pay the bills, right?
Right.
And so from that perspective, I always loved writing, and I always loved working with the media. I worked for radio stations. I worked for television stations. I worked for print media. And I did all this when I was young also. And then I transitioned and went from media and went to work in corporate communications. And I loved what I did. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I loved it, but it was very stressful. I worked 80-hour weeks. I traveled all over the US and often to Latin America, and sometimes, to across the big pond.
Oh, yeah.
And I never had, nowadays people have much more, they have PTOs and they have more work-life balance. But, I'm the child of Depression era parents, where we were taught you work your butt off to don't ever be without a job.
Yeah, I think a lot of generations went through that. We were always taught to, you work, and yeah.
And, we didn't look at our own wellness. It was, we just knew that we had to do the best for our work. So anyway, ultimately what the trigger, because I always wanted to leave the corporate world. But finally, I got to a stage where I felt that my family obligations were less. And I remember I did a lot of mindfulness weekends when I would, do all these journaling, and I would do all these forward visioning. And I remember putting together budgets and what ifs, and how much did I really need in terms of income if all I ate was rice and beans.
Yeah.
And then I was working when I was in town on either a Saturday or a Sunday. I would work as a yoga teacher at a local ashram in San Antonio. And 2 weekends in a row, there were 2 different speakers. And the topics had different themes. Again, different people, different themes. But I interpreted them the same.
Okay.
And the message to me was, I'm going to be very, exaggerate it a little bit, but I felt like I was doing the devil's work because I wasn't, even though I loved the corporate communications work I did, my clients were not in the best interest of most people, and I would never purchase or consume any of the products that I was representing. So anyway, after those 2 weeks, I remember I spoke to the wives of one of the speakers, and I said, I think I'm going to quit my job after what your husband said. And I thought she would give me like a high five, and she's like, no, you have to, you still have to have your financial.
Yeah, you still have to maintain somehow.
But I did leave and everything was fine.
Yeah, that's a kind of incredible, the mindset we get. And I think that I would think that kind of probably scared her, because they wouldn't want to be responsible for if something didn't work out and you up and quit your job, because a lot of people would, take that as, maybe that they caused that, but you knew.
And I was in that same job for close to 20 years.
Yeah. And you work with some high-powered people and stuff too. So that, I can imagine that had to be a lot of stress and a lot to get underway there.
Plus, earlier in my career in the marketing communications field, I was doing a lot of crisis management. And crises were the norm for me in terms of the work environment, in terms of whether it be bomb threats, suicides, shootings, all that, that was just the norm.
Yeah, the word crisis to me just sounds stressful in itself. So how would you say your experiences influenced your approach to the mind-body wellness?
Well, the mind-body wellness was never separate from me.
Okay.
So I would credit my mind-body wellness for being able to get me through all of those crises after crises. And in fact, most people that I work with would probably think that, I was always fairly even keeled, whereas a lot of people would, just kind of go crazy. But in reality, if you're working in crises, you have to be calm and collected.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's all the mindfulness that I did and my approach to everything that helps me with that.
So you were actually working on it kind of almost maybe kind of behind the scenes while you were doing the corporate?
Absolutely. Right.
Wow. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know. I don't think a lot of people are aware of how to do that or know how to integrate that. I think we get so busy in our day-to-day lives that the rest of it just kind of goes away until either tragedy strikes or some kind of trauma happens and makes people slow down.
Well, one of the anecdotes that I have in my book is about a true experience that I had when there was a lot of stress one day because we were trying to get $1 million piece of business and we had the presentation. And the woman that was in charge, I'm not saying she was higher ranked than me, but
right.
She was in charge and she felt that she could tell everyone what to do. And I felt that she was just being so rude in her approaches with everything she was doing and saying. And we had maybe a 15-minute break to, get something to eat or go to the bathroom. And I went into my office, I closed the door, and I meditated. And I should mention, before I went into meditation, I wanted to just wring her neck.
But you knew enough to take some time and kind of regroup.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I came out of my room, again, I didn't eat anything, but I came out of that meditation and I seriously wanted to hug her. She probably I'm sure she needed some big hugs.
Yeah. That's got to be quite the experience. So with your meditation stuff, is that something that you've kind of learned on your own? Did you have mentors?
That's a great question. And in retrospect, I recognize that I learned breath work and meditation on my own before I even knew what those words were. And it was because I just intuitively found that those were the only things that helped with, I had digestive disorders, digestive disorders, and I could sometimes have severe pain. I remember once I waited until I was done with work. I was living in Mexico City, which is stressful enough. I waited until I was done with my work. I hopped on a bus and took it to a hospital, to the ER. But again, I knew that the only thing that really helped me was drinking herbal teas, but also breath work and meditation. But again, I didn't know what those were. It was just that I found them on my own. And I remember a lot of times when I was in Mexico in particular, I found it was helpful if I would be outside. Sometimes I was not a guest at a fancy hotel.
Right.
But I would walk in if I were a guest. And I went to the swimming pool and I didn't go in the pool, but I just sat down poolside and did my meditation and my breath work there. And I remember, just being outside and hearing the water, that was really helpful. So that was, again, before I was 21, I kind of learned all that on my own. But then, of course, I started seeking and searching for people that really were authorities and experts in the field. And that is basically kind of the concept of my book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. It's basically about 12 of my gurus around the world, and they're all different religions, they're all different ethnicities and races, and they're not necessarily all gurus, but to me, they're my gurus because I learned from each and every one. So one of them, for example, is a Native American elder, and I have always been interested and, just enthralled with Native American traditions, and I find them so beautiful. And so one of them is a Native American elder, and the chapter in that book is all about how to kind of appreciate being close to nature and the spirit guides and in spirituality from a Native American perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. There is like you said, there are so many different perspectives and so many people and things out there that we can learn from. And that's amazing that you got to travel and do all of that. What motivated you to write the book?
So that's a great question. And I remember earlier, maybe it was 5 years earlier or even more, I remember that I was doing theta healing.
Okay.
And my leader for theta healing, I remember she told me at one point something about how she knew I was going to be writing a book. I had no idea. And I said, really? I said, what's it going to be about? Because if I'm going to write a book, hey, give me an idea. She said, oh, no, I can't tell you that. It has to come from within. So that was just kind of shelved. It was like, hey, I've got no idea what I'm going to be writing a book about. And then during the early days of COVID, I knew that things were not going to be the same. And I also didn't want things to be the same.
Right.
And I was already dedicated completely to mind body. I had just, before COVID, interestingly enough, I had just resigned my last client from the marketing communications world because I was working, even though I was self-employed, I was working 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
So I resigned my last public relations client right before COVID. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden I had zero work.
You went from full throttle to full stop.
Exactly. But I used that for so much introspection. I spent maybe 4 hours a day doing different types of introspective practices. And my Ayurvedic doctor, my longtime Ayurvedic doctor, he told me a long time ago that I needed to basically practice Sabbath or Shabbat. And that's also one of the chapters in my book is about a digital disconnect 1 day a week. And not only do I honor it as a digital disconnect, but I also don't drive in a car 1 day a week, because before I was driving 7 days a week because I was working all over. And so he had always told me that I needed to do that disconnect once a week. And he also told me that I needed to periodically do 3 to 4 day disconnects.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so during COVID, I thought, okay, this is my invitation. Because again, before I was working 7 days a week and I was driving 7 days a week all over. I had to use my devices for everything. So during COVID, I did my own 3 or 4 day mini silent retreat at my home. And I patterned it after Vipassana, even though I have not attended the traditional 10-day Vipassanas, but I know in Vipassana, you traditionally are not even allowed a pencil or paper. Well, I gave myself one small piece of paper and pencil. And so it turned out that everything for my book came to me during that time, during those meditations. And I used that small piece of paper and the pencil to create not only my outline for the book, but part of my marketing plan.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So it just goes to show, of course, the power of when you're mindful versus when you're running, like most of us are, we're running to catch our, what's it called about you running to catch your tail?
I call it a rat race or a hamster wheel. Yeah, either way. Yeah, we all get caught up in that. And it's, next thing you know, one day it's like, where did that week go? It's just like, whoop, gone. And, or some of us times we'll sit there and say, my God, we're more than halfway through this year. We're getting close to the end of the year. And if you're in that rat race, it feels like it just started not too long ago, but yet, whoop, we're here. Yeah, definitely. So what were some of the key lessons that you learned from the diverse mentors across the different cultures and practices that you came across?
Well, what came to me when I was doing this meditation, the idea came to me to kind of compartmentalize into one key lesson from each of my primary gurus, or the ones that I felt gave me some life lesson. So it's kind of like life lessons from my dozen gurus. And that's basically how my book is. It's 12 chapters based on 12 gurus. I introduce the guru, my connection to them, and I talk in almost every chapter about the challenges that my gurus faced, because sometimes you look at somebody and you put them on a pedestal and you think, oh my God, these people have perfect lives. But you don't recognize the challenges that they have all gone through. You just look at them as if they've done so much. So I thought it was very important to highlight challenges that they went through, because we all go through challenges. And the whole purpose of my book was to teach people that you have the power to be your healthiest and your happiest. And it doesn't cost money. It doesn't take a lot of time, but you have to be mindful about it.
Yeah.
And you have to have the energy to do it, even if it's 10 minutes a day. And so anyway, in terms of what some of the key messages are, one of them, as I mentioned, is that digital disconnect once a week. Another one is all about a gratitude practice. Another one is about what I call karma yoga. Some people call it seva, or selfless service. And then there are others that are more traditional forms of holistic therapy, such as sound therapy, laughter as medicine. I have one chapter on mindfulness, and I have another chapter about yoga and the brain. And my guru for that is, he's with Harvard, affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and he has been researching yoga and the brain for about 30 years.
Wow.
And so it's really fascinating. When we say yoga, you know, we're not talking about, I mean, I purposely wore this little shirt today.
Yeah.
But that's not what yoga is. So that's why, to me, yoga is all about gratitude. To me, yoga is about selfless service. Yoga is about singing and dancing and laughing and having quiet time, the disconnecting. And then I do have one chapter, only one chapter is on the physical. Well, yeah, you could kind of say two. So one is on the physical, and it's based on chronic pain. And the reason is because 1 in 5 adults in the US have chronic pain. The most common chronic pain is back pain. And from the time I was about 12 years old, I had to go to an orthopedic surgeon because I had chronic back pain as a kid. And my chronic back pain is all musculoskeletal, and that is actually how I became interested in the physical aspect of not only yoga, but also Pilates, just because I needed to help my back from a physical, postural standpoint. And then the other area that is physical, but not in terms of, you know, not doing these things, but, but digestion. And it's all about digestion from an Ayurvedic standpoint. And for anyone that doesn't know, Ayurveda is the life science from India, and it's 5,000 years old. I consider it very similar to traditional Chinese medicine. And as I am a certified yoga therapist, and as a certified yoga therapist, a lot of what I do taps into traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda.
Yeah, I have heard of Ayurveda, and you're starting to learn more and more about it. But it's amazing because, like you said, it's been around for over 5,000 years, but it was never really taught or discussed. And I know we have a lot more to talk about that, and what some of the common physical or emotional challenges that you see people face. But we got to take a quick break from a word from our sponsors, and we will be right back. So, Deborah, we were talking in the beginning about how you help people come through emotional and come out as champions. How do you define champion in the context of overcoming personal struggles as highlighted in your book?
Well, first of all, it's not necessarily an on and off switch or black and white, but it's a continuum. And
Right.
so it's getting from here to here or here, and whatever you can do, any progression. It's just like there are a lot of people talk about, people talk about how the only way you can get anywhere is one step at a time, or how the turtle wins the race, going slowly. And so it all depends on what's going on with you. But from an emotional level, what I focus on in particular are what I think the most common issues, especially among Americans today. And those are PTSD, anxiety, stress, and depression. And one of the things that I talk about regarding PTSD, which I find fascinating, is it used to be, they've changed the name of PTSD so many times. And it was always associated with being in the military and being in combat.
Yeah.
But we can have PTSD from so many different traumas in our lives. And a perfect example is 9/11. Now, I was thankfully, driving from home to work when everything happened. I was totally safe. But there have been reports of, let's just say the same people that experience the exact same thing, and how one person responds is not going to be the same as how someone else responds. And there was something that I read about a child and the father may have been a therapist, and they were walking the streets of New York City when everything was taking place. And the father's conversation to the young child were to address the tragedy and the shock of what was going on, but to make the child still feel safe. And as a result, they did, of course, with children, not always, but it's very common to do art therapy. Yeah. And so the child pretty much survived the trauma in as healthy a manner as you can, whereas other people don't. And again, for sometimes, as I mentioned, sometimes it's just how you are wired inside, but sometimes also it's very much the way you respond in the immediacy and what's going on around you. So again, there are a lot of different things, but more than 2 in 5 adults age 18 or over experience symptoms of an anxiety or a depressive disorder during one 7-day period in the year that I wrote my book.
Wow.
So that is so high. The other thing that I find so hard to take is people's contentedness or lack of contentedness, which is not depression. So the thing that I talk about in my book is the difference between being blue and clinical depression. So obviously, again, there are gradations.
Right.
But what I kind of find shocking, and this is also quotes from my book, are that only 14% of Americans said that in one poll, said that they were very happy. And more than half Americans claimed that they were lonely. And of course, loneliness and happiness go hand in hand. And I have also, I'm a longtime blogger. I've been blogging since 2019. And I have been blogging, again, for my website and others about mind, body. And I remember one article that I wrote quite a long time ago because I was so intrigued by the research findings were that the biggest growth in religions, and it's not necessarily religion, but was the spiritual but not religious.
Right.
So again, it's not a religion, but in that area. So as opposed to, let's just say, Catholicism is going down, not as many people, but what's going up is spiritual but not religious. And what I found was so interesting was they did have these studies, and I might get it wrong because it's been a long time ago that I read it, but those people that had either spirituality or religion lived to be longer and they were happier. They had more of that sense of contentment. And that is something that I tried to do in my book because I don't consider myself religious at all,
Right.
but I do consider myself very spiritual. And yet I have always respected everyone's religion because I understand that religion can really help people in many ways, not only from a spiritual side, but it can erase the feelings of loneliness. I mean, the fact if you go to a place of worship periodically, or if you go to Bible study or whatever, you've got your sense of community. And we don't have enough sense of community now. And then, of course, post-COVID, there's a huge number of people compared to before who are working remotely, which means you don't even have the little coffee clutches that you used when I went to work.
Right.
So
people learned how to build communities and stuff more through, computers or online, or I should say relationships and stuff. But it's great that you have that, but I don't think it replaces necessarily the community or the sense of belonging when you're actually with people.
And that's also why it was important to me that in my book, even though it's from the boxing ring to the ashram, and for those who don't know, ashrams are typically in India or from India, and so therefore they are traditionally, from Hindu traditions, and they are centers for study. And I think 4 of my gurus are from ashrams, and I have spent time at ashrams in the United States, in Italy, and in India, multiple ashrams in India, and multiple ashrams in the United States. And yet, to me, all the teachings of all of my gurus, they all coalesce, because to me, the spirituality is all the same. And in fact, one of my gurus who I feature in my book, I didn't talk about this in the book, but I was with him in India and we walked up this big hill. And when we got up that big hill, he was talking about how there are many ways that you can get up that hill. And you can go any way you want. One way is not right and the other is not wrong. So you can take whatever path you want, but go up that hill.
Yeah. That is beautiful. That is so true. We're always so worried about what's right and wrong. It's like, it doesn't have to be a right and wrong. You just need to move forward, or move in your path. So, and I know you talked about disconnecting from digital and that, but can you offer some accessible tips that maybe people can start, like right now, just 10 minutes a day, and maybe share some of the techniques that your readers can implement right away?
Specifically for the digital disconnect, or you're talking about other ones?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, laugh. So I am actually a laughter yoga leader, and laughter yoga was created by a doctor, an MD in Mumbai, India, and he created it along with his yoga instructor wife. And there are so many benefits to laughter yoga. And the guru that I talk about in my book it's an amazing story about someone that I knew back in the 1980s when I lived in South America. And I knew this person just as a normal guy. Well, he ended up being a victim of, he was attacked and shot at, and the bullets went through his spinal cord. He ended up being paraplegic. He ended up, having tremendous amount of depression, which is natural, but also constant pain. And he did all the normal things you do. He took all the different drugs. He had multiple, I think he might have had 7 different surgeries. What he found was most effective was laughter. And he ended up becoming friends with Dr. Patch Adams from, the movie that Robin Williams portrayed him. And this man ended up becoming president of his country after all of that happened, because, again, he totally, we talked before about, the mental, the mental and the physical are so tied together, they're like this. And the same thing with the spiritual. And this man, I have no idea what his official religion is. I could guess, but he's also very into quantum physics, which oftentimes has a spiritual element to it as well.
Yeah. And we've always said laughter is like the best medicine. And if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I had another gentleman on that's a laughter yoga leader, but I believe it has something to do like with the endorphins and stuff that it releases, and that even if it's a fake laugh, your body really doesn't know the difference. Would that be correct?
What I include in my book, because each chapter in my book has research findings to back everything up, because I'm the kind of person, it's like, oh yeah, that sounds nice, but prove it to me.
Right.
And it's amazing, because going back to the doctor in India who created laughter yoga, the first time he did it, he went to a park in Mumbai, free for everyone, and he started telling jokes. Well, the next week, he's like, I don't know any more jokes. I can't go back and tell the same jokes. What am I going to do? And that was when he developed what is today laughter yoga with his wife. And it's called simulated laughter. We also call it fake it until you make it. And what I find fascinating is that according to one research findings, they said simulated laughter had even greater effect than organic, natural laughter.
Wow, that I would not have thought of.
Right.
I would have thought it would have been the opposite.
Exactly. But with laughter yoga, the way that it was created, a lot of it is about breath work. Because again, his wife was a yoga instructor, is a yoga instructor, and so there's a lot of breath work incorporated. And when I do it, I incorporate relaxation. I also incorporate song and dance and babbling, or when you're not making real intelligible sounds. And I have a new grandbaby, and I do laughter yoga with him every day. So I'll give you some examples of what I do every day in 10 minutes or less. I was mentioning the babbling, or the is just making funny sounds. Well, I love music. And so one of the songs that I sing to him all the time, and just today I played the original version and I danced along to it, but sometimes I just sing it to him, is Selena's song, Biddy Biddy Bum Bum. Well, biddy biddy bum bum means nothing, but it's fun to say. Right. And then of course, you can laugh along, you move. And so that's one thing. I mean, it's just joyful. And of course, when you're dancing, it's good for your cardiovascular system. It's good for your circulation. So it's just good for all that. And then there are other things that I do, and you can clap or, use any instruments to kind of get a beat, or you can stomp your feet, but you just go, ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. And then you keep doing it, and you make that ha, ha, ha more of a laughter. So ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. And then traditionally we have hand movements for each of them. So you can do ho, ho with your hands kind of, pushing forward, ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. You can do all sorts of fun things so that you're moving your body, you're doing the breath work, and you're simulating the laughter. So those are just two things that are fun, and, I think sometimes, I know, again, I mentioned that I'm really I want to read research for everything I do, because my brain is like, you got to prove it to me. Well, I'm very much, a book nerd, and, I want to know it. And I tend to use my brain too much, but we need to turn that brain off. And we just need to have fun and let go. And one of the things that my guru in South America, who was the one that became the president, that he said is that society often tells people not to laugh. They say, like for kids, and he says, children learn to laugh before they can talk. And it's true. I see it with my grandbaby.
Right.
He laughs. He loves to laugh, but he can't talk. But when children are growing up, parents say to them all the time, be serious. What are you laughing about? They say things like that. And then one of the examples that I give in my book, and this has statistics, it's about when the Taliban came into power. And they basically outlawed laughing for women. And then I give the statistics of after that happened. Now, granted, there are a lot of other things that are going to cause these things in, when the Taliban came to power, but then the level of depression among the women, shot up. But we also know that laughter is that escape mechanism. So the more stress that we have, the more we need to laugh.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely true. There's so many things that we started out doing like when we were kids, and then yet we're told not to do that or to be more an adult. And I'm not saying there's not times for everything, because there's some times that it can come across very inappropriate to be laughing, even if it's your stress relief. But yeah, I think we got really far away from that. So in what ways can readers apply the lessons, from your book to find balance in their busy lives?
Well, I actually have a 6-week tracker that people can download when they're reading the book, because I recognize that some people may need more of the tips from one chapter versus another. And so while people may want to read the book chapter 1 through chapter 12, they can skip around. And if they're having chronic pain, maybe they read that chapter first about chronic pain, and then they can, go to something else. And so likewise, when you're beginning to do something from the book, you don't have to necessarily do all of them. You can start with one and then go on to another. And every chapter, I have 5 easy tips from my guru, and then I have a give it a try that like the 10-minute give it a try that is my suggestion. So I'm just going to open up the book at random. Oh, this is a good one. So I opened it up to the chapter on singing and silence bring inner peace. So I am going to go to the 5 easy tips from my gurus. Number 1, and I don't know why everyone can't do this. I do it. Sing every day. Doesn't cost you a penny. You can do it in your car. You can do it in the bathtub. You can do it wherever. Number 2, which kind of goes to what you were talking about just a second ago, become childlike in your creativity and quest for learning.
Nice.
And then each one has more supporting statements, but I'm just reading the headlines. Number 3, serve and uplift humanity with your talents, abilities, and gifts. Number 4, release negative emotions. And number 5, love yourself and love others. And then the give it a try. This, I actually have a YouTube video that people can go to where they can follow this, but it's basically the bija chakras. So most of us know what the chakras are. They're the energy centers that go from, from your sacrum up to the crown, like right around here.
Right.
And so they're energetic centers, but each one has a seed sound, which is called a bija. And so, an example is for your first chakra, it's lum, like Lum. And so you can do repetitions of the chakras, the bija sounds, the seed sounds, and you can do it, 1 minute, 2 minutes. You can do it as long as you want. I think the video that I have, it's kind of like a tutorial. So it might be more like 7 minutes because it's a tutorial. But again, what I wanted to do with my book is I wanted to give each chapter the give it a try section that people can really do in 10 minutes or less.
Nice. So when you're doing the chakras like that, so like you're saying the lum, so you just keep humming out the lum and that helps that chakra.
So ideally you should focus on each of the chakras and then you kind of go up the chakras and you change what you're repeating and you focus, on the chakra each time you go up.
Is the YouTube, is it attached to your website? Can they get to your YouTube from your website, or how should they find you on YouTube?
Well, in my book, I have a direct link.
Okay.
And in here, I'd have to.
Oh, they can get the book from your website though,
yes.
too, right?
Yes.
And is it available anywhere else or just?
Oh, well, you can get the book, any online retailer, and it's available at different independent bookstores, yoga studios, and even health food stores. But the other thing that I have that's a free download that relates to this is I have a coloring, kind of like a coloring chart of the different chakras, because each chakra, aside from the bija or the seed sound, has a different color. And so what's beautiful is if you have that color chart in front of you, and then, you can look at that and you can not only focus on the chakra, but focus on the color of the chakra as you repeat the bija.
Nice. Okay. So looking ahead, what do you hope readers will take away from their experience from the boxing ring to the ashram?
Well, I just hope that everyone can empower themselves to be their healthiest and their happiest. And, for example, let's just say, whatever life serves you, you can still make it better. And so again, and I will say, for example, from the time I was very young, I had digestive disorders and I had chronic back pain, and I used those to become healthier and happier and to get into holistic lifestyle and to learn more and into fitness. And then later in life, and this is something I was always careful of because I have diabetes is rampant in my family, and my mom passed away from diabetes, and she was a very educated diabetic. She wrote about diabetes. Wow. For Diabetes Journal and things like that. And so even though I was always really careful about my sugar intake, and even though I've had weight issues, by the time I got my call, my weight was totally normal. And so now that was probably about close to 15 years ago. And I don't take any meds. traditionally, people that would be in my situation within 5 to 10 years after the original diagnosis of prediabetes, they progressed to diabetes. But I did the opposite. I was able to lower my blood sugar and get off of the diabetes meds.
Nice. Yeah, that's always good. I work on the same thing with my fiance. I've been getting him off and reversing it because, yeah, once you go down that spiral, that is very difficult. Do you still teach the yoga, laughter yoga, and work with clients, or?
I do. So I do a lot of different things. And so what I love doing is, it's connects with you, is I love travel. And so I have spent up to 4 months working in different countries. And so I like to offer different workshops when I am in the different countries in particular. But I also have, a lot of different things that I offer. I've created so many different workshops, and they're all therapeutic workshops, but some of them are available now on demand, and they're on my website. And so I have some are on demand, and then the other are, just based on contact me, and almost all of them are able to be done virtually now.
Nice. Yeah, because as I say, either some people may be afraid to travel or may not have the ability to travel just yet, but it's great that that's accessible for them at home. We have a couple minutes left, Deborah. What is the most important thing you want people to take away from this? Or what do you want them to know?
Well, the most important thing is that we can never separate mind from body. And I talk about my digestive disorders, and from the time I was really young, I recognized, I went to a gastroenterologist, and again, I was maybe 12 years old, and I recognized that my digestive disorders were stress-induced and stress-related. And the last bad flare-up that I had was the day of my father's funeral, which was, of course, a long time ago. And I may be able to handle everything, but there are some things, hey, that just happened. And then also the spirit. So as I mentioned, the statistics about spiritual but not religious, and how when people have some form of spirituality or religion, they are healthier and happier. And too often we suppress that. And I recognize that I suppressed the spiritual side in my life for way too long, because again, I was, always like the scientist. And one of my gurus is called the spiritual scientist, because he has a science background, but he is a monk. And he says it took his scientific brain to convince him of why spirituality is important.
Yeah. And we're not saying you're not ever going to come across stress again. You will, but at least you have all the tools in your toolbox to help even that out and not, at least not go spiraling down. Normally when you have the right tools, you can bounce back a lot faster.
Right. And again, even if it's just bouncing one step at a time.
Yeah. Well, Deborah, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing that information. I look forward to reading your book. I will definitely have to get that, because that is just, I love learning about that stuff. And like you said, there's so many fascinating things, and seeing all the different perspectives. And since you went and traveled all those places for me, and hopefully everyone else, they'll look forward to reading that, learning from it, and connecting with you as well. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you. And one of the things that I say is I loved traveling the world and spending, my whole life traipsing around the world to learn from different gurus. But all you have to do is you can order online, and 1 or 2 days, however long it takes to get your book and however long it takes you to read it, and it's done. And it's pennies compared to what I spent.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you're not done traveling yet either. So I want to thank you, and everybody, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next week.